The Zinthari conclave fleet translated into the Sol system not with the thunder of conquest, but with the quiet arrogance of completed mathematics. Their arrival was a thermodynamic whisper against the cosmic background. There was no declaration, no demand for surrender. They simply arrived and began to work. Spheres of shimmering silver, each the size of a small moon, deployed crystalline sensor arrays that drank in the electromagnetic spectrum of the blue-green world below. Their scan was exhaustive and ruthlessly efficient. It mapped the thermal signatures of every known human weapons depot. It counted warheads, cataloged missile silos, assessed the yield of nuclear arsenals, and evaluated the defensive capabilities of orbital platforms and ground-based lasers. Their logic was impeccable. Quantify the physical threat, assess the probability of meaningful resistance, execute the appropriate pacification protocol. The data streamed into their collective consciousness, a river of numbers and probabilities. The analysis was instantaneous and unanimous. The report, broadcast on a frequency all nascent spacefaring species could hear, was a death sentence delivered with clinical detachment. Assessment: Terran civilization, designation humanity. Military technology index: 0.73, pre-singularity. Cohesive defense probability: 3.2%. Threat classification: negligible. Recommended action: peaceful assimilation. No significant resistance projected. To the galaxy listening in, it was a pronouncement. Earth was not a prize to be won, but a resource to be logged. The conclave had rendered judgment. America, along with every other nation, received the transmission. And America did what it had always done when faced with a seemingly absolute conclusion. It began to question the premises. While world leaders panicked and military commands scrambled to readiness states they knew were futile, a different kind of activation occurred. It didn't originate from the Pentagon or the Kremlin, but from places both forgotten and mundane. In the basements of decommissioned telephone exchanges, banks of ancient modems hummed to life. In university physics departments, experimental radio telescopes subtly redirected their dishes. Across the globe, amateur radio operators, a hobby long declared obsolete, heard a specific, encrypted sequence on a frequency reserved for emergency traffic. It wasn't an order. It was an invitation to participate in a game. This was Project Miasma, a contingency so abstract it was never officially weaponized, only theorized. Its core principle was simple. Against a logic-bound enemy that relies on perfect data, the ultimate defense is not better data, but poisoned data. America didn't mobilize its armies. It mobilized its noise. Civilian communication satellites, their thrusters firing in patterns that defied standard orbital mechanics, began to drift into new, seemingly random paths. Old military satellites, declared dead decades ago, powered up and began broadcasting garbled, powerful signals on frequencies the Zinthari had identified as Terran military command. The entire planet's electronic chatter, from stock market feeds and social media algorithms to air traffic control and weather satellite data, was subtly, deliberately infected with controlled chaos. To human observers, little changed. To the Zinthari's sensor net, the clean, predictable signal of a primitive civilization began to shimmer and fracture like a mirage. The Zinthari did not command through intuition or courage, but through predictive strategic engines. Vast quantum computers that simulated every possible engagement trillions of times per second, selecting the action with the highest probability of success. Their strength was absolute predictive certainty. Their weakness was the absolute need for it. First, their sensors detected a massive energy buildup beneath the Rocky Mountains. Signatures consistent with a hidden nuclear arsenal orders of magnitude larger than previously scanned. Before this could be processed, the signal vanished, replaced by a contradictory reading showing the same location as geologically inert. Simultaneously, their gravimetric scanners picked up the silhouette of a non-existent stealth fleet leaving Jupiter's orbit. Thermal imagers on their drones over the Pacific showed the sudden, impossible appearance of a city-sized heat bloom that dissipated before a probe could be dispatched. Radio intercepts crackled with conflicting orders from what sounded like a dozen different human command authorities, each contradicting the others. The Zen-3 engines, designed to parse reality into clean, probabilistic branches, began to choke. The data was not just noisy. It was logically inconsistent, a storm of mutually exclusive facts. Their prediction matrices, tasked with calculating the optimal moment to begin pacification, spiraled into recursive loops. Probability percentages flickered between 99.9% success and 0.01% success. The engines, faced with a reality that refused to cohere, did the only thing they could. They demanded more data. And America fed them more, a torrent of beautiful, elegant, devastating lies. On the bridges of the Zen-3 command spheres, a silence deeper than space descended. Officers stood frozen, not in fear, but in sheer computational indigestion. Their neural interfaces, linked directly to the strategic engines, fed them a staccato burst of impossible directives. One moment, the engines advised immediate, overwhelming orbital bombardment to neutralize a suddenly revealed planetary shield that did not exist. A nanosecond later, they recommended a full withdrawal, as new data proved the system was a deliberate trap laid by a rival galactic power. Then, they suggested opening diplomatic channels with a human faction that the data indicated was secretly in control, a faction that was entirely fictional. The mighty fleet, a symphony of perfect coordination moments before, became a cacophony of hesitation. Ships powering weapons systems were countermanded by ships initiating retreat vectors. Communication channels jammed with frantic, engine-generated queries seeking data verification. The Conclave's greatest strength, its unified, logical mind, had become a cage of its own making. They were paralyzed not by force, but by ambiguity. They could not act because they could no longer decide what was real. The clean, binary universe of threat or no threat had been replaced by a fog of maybe. For 24 hours, the Zen-3 fleet hung in orbit, caught in a static dance of indecision. On Earth, life proceeded with a strange normality under the silent, frozen Armada. Finally, the Conclave commander, its logic circuits overheating from the strain of processing paradoxes, opened a direct channel. It did not broadcast to the planet, but targeted the source of the most coherent of the contradictory signals, a nondescript data center in Omaha, Nebraska. The message was not a threat, but a plaintive demand for categorization, the only thing its mind could formulate. Query: identify weapons system designation. Query: state yield. Query: state range. The reply was almost immediate, a plain text string on the same frequency. System: cognitive dissonance. Yield: infinite to dependent minds. Range: as far as your certainty reaches. A pause, then a second transmission followed, this one in a more conversational, almost weary tone. You scan for what breaks things. You didn't scan for what breaks models of things. Your weapon is prediction. Ours is the unpredictable. We call it Tuesday. There was no counter-argument. There was no logic to apply. The Conclave's engines, presented with a paradigm they could not simulate, finally produced a single, clear probability. Continued engagement carried a 100% chance of systemic predictive failure. That was, to them, a fate worse than destruction. Without another transmission, the Silver Spheres powered down their weapons, retracted their sensors, and executed a perfectly coordinated withdrawal. They left not in defeat, but in strategic retreat from an ontological hazard. That night, in the Galactic Senate's Intelligence Digest, a new entry was filed under extreme hazard protocols. Next to species that wielded planet killers or dimensional weapons, a new line was added: humanity, Terran, primary threat vector, informational toxicity, capability, induce systemic uncertainty. Do not engage without probability shielding. Warning: their normal state is our chaos state. Victory against them is mathematically undefined. They had come to conquer a planet and had instead discovered a weapon they could not see, could not measure, and could never defend against. The sheer, relentless, creative chaos of the unmade mind. America hadn't fought. It had simply reminded the universe that not everything that matters can be calculated.